Hi everyone, am I audible? Okay. Great. Cool. We'll start with a brief revision of what we did yesterday, right? So very quickly, we were going to start prototypes, right? And we realized first we had to discuss what prototypes are, right? And having said that, we began with, we began our journey with understanding a few patterns, right? So just going over all of them once again. So if you look here, what we try to accomplish here is we have created an animal, which is an empty object, right? And then we are giving it two types of things, right? One are attributes, which are these, which are basically static properties. And the other are behaviors, right? So these behaviors, of course, are modeled by function. So using these two things, one is attributes, the other is behavior, we are able to model an animal object, right? But very soon we realized that this way of creating animals has a problem because whenever you have to create a new animal, this code needs to be reused, right? It needs to be reusable. For the same, we moved to something called as functional instantiation, right? So what was functional instantiation? In that you created a function, which was called function animal. It was taking two parameters, namely name and power, right? You were setting those attributes on your animal, right? This is the animal object which you created right here. Correct? Moving forward from here, guys, what we realized is the problem with this kind of implementation is whenever we call the animal function, right, with the two different variables, let's say in this one, I'm calling it with liony to create a lion animal, doggy to create a dog, right? The problem is each time you call this function, new functions are going to get created. And what are these new functions if you look at it? And why will they be new? Because these are anonymous functions. Anonymous functions, since they don't have a name, each time you construct an anonymous function, right, it needs to essentially have, it needs new memory, right? And the problem with this kind of implementation is whenever, let's say you are creating tens and hundreds of animals, it is going to waste more memory, right? Use a lot more memory. Okay. And why should there be more memory for functions which are so common in nature, right? So these are common functions, right? So these are the kind of functions which any animal is going to have: eat, run, and rest. So even for common functions, we had to use more memory, right? Which does not scale very well because let's say you wanted to create a zoo of 10,000 animals. What will happen is you will end up using 30,000 memory for these functions, right? Everyone clear with this? Right? The more memory part, everyone is clear? Okay, wonderful. Then we realized one optimization over it, right? What was that optimization? It's called functional instantiation with shared methods, right? So what we did here is the common methods, which were eat, run, and rest, we moved to a different object, right? And that object we are calling as shared animal methods. So this now holds reference to these functions. So in some sense, these become functional expressions, right? Now, I named this as animal I because it's an improved animal in that sense, right? Finally, what we've done is when we call this animal I with different animals, two things happen. One is these properties, they get set on our animal, and these are the properties that you passed here in the function. And for the remaining methods, which were shared methods, we are just referencing these from the shared animal methods object, right? So how this helps us is now, let's say, even if you had to create 10,000 animals, these methods will always remain common, right? Because they were declared here once, and then we are reusing them for every animal, right? Is this clear, guys? How we improved the usage of memory and prevented duplication of both code and memory, right? Okay, great. Now we moved one step forward, right? So we learned about a new feature, right? Which is called object.create, correct? So what is object.create? So object.create, as the name suggests, is a mechanism for creating new objects, right? So up until now, how do you know to create objects? Whenever you want to create an object, you say animal is equal to empty object, and then whatever you do with the object is up to you, right? However, when you create an object with object.create, it gives you one special feature. What is that special feature? Let's read this line. It creates an object which delegates to another object on failed lookups, right? So what does that mean? Whenever there is some key which will not be found on the object which was created using object.create, those keys will be looked up on the parent object, right? Okay, so we just took a very small example of this. Let's say there was a parent object with had name, age, and nationality. I created a child with object.create parent, right? Now, when you do child.name, child.age, these are the two things that you've defined on the child. But when you do child.nationality, of course, this is not a property which exists on the child object because the child object only has two properties. One is age, the other is name, right? So when you do child nationality, now since this guy was created with object.create, that failed lookup will go to parent, right? Once it goes to parent, in parent, there is something called as nationality. So the nationality of the child is going to be the nationality of the parent. Everyone, is this fine? Everyone. When I say everyone, I mean everyone. Okay, any complication you feel? Good, let's move forward. Right, so now we try to understand how we can use this technology that we've very recently learned to improve our animal eye further, right? Or to improve our animal creator further, right? How do we do that? Guys, we had created shared animal methods eye, right? Which was basically our object, which had these different animal methods. So now I in fact call it as animal eye, right? So which is basically an even improved version of animal eye, right? And how does it work? When I'm calling it with these two properties, lion 100, dog 20, right? What ends up happening is at the very beginning, you create this animal object with object.create instead of creating it with the usual object notation. And how does that help us? It helps us because now whenever there is a failed lookup, right? Suppose you say lion I dot run 100, right? What is going to happen is it will see that, hey, does lion as an object have the property run? No, it does not. But since it was created using object.create, we can delegate those failed lookups on run, right? And easily we will be able to execute this function. So this is all that we have discussed yesterday. If you guys have any doubts, please ask. Otherwise, we'll move forward. No doubts? Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So now, like we've understood, using object.create, we are able to create a feature wherein the failed lookups will be delegated to the parent, right? So this is pretty good, right? We've seen a lot of improvements from where we started. We've gone into a place where we have a functionality of avoiding memory. We also have a functionality of delegating failed lookups, right? Now, guys, if you look at this, there is still one problem, right? And what is that problem, right? For every animal that we are creating, right, having shared methods which lies exclusive of this function, right, still looks like a hacky solution, still looks like a bad solution, right? Because if these behaviors actually belong to this function or animal II, then why should they be separated, right? However, if you actually move them in, you will again suffer the same problem, because each time that you call animal II, this object will have to be newly created, right? So that is not solving the problem, right? Does everyone understand the problem? Guys, did you understand the problem? What did I say? I said the problem is, although we are saving a lot of memory by doing this approach, right? But keeping a separate shared methods object for something which actually belongs to this animal function, does not look right? So basically, there should be some mechanism using which we don't have to do this, okay? And it turns out that JavaScript does provide a feature, right? And it's actually the reason why we started this whole discussion. There is something called as prototype. Okay, now let's understand what this prototype is, right? So very simply put, in JavaScript, every function has a prototype, right? Every function in JavaScript has a prototype. What does that mean? It basically means that whenever you write any function, so I'll just open the JavaScript console here. Can you guys see this code? Guys, is this visible? Okay. So let's say I just copy this guy here, right? So what is this? This is just a simple function. If I do animal II dot prototype, what do you see? We see an object, right? So what did I just say? Let me repeat myself. Every function in JavaScript has a prototype property that references an object. Okay. So a functional property which references an object is called a prototype. Let me write that out. Functional property referencing an object is prototype. Okay. So now this might be hard for some people to swallow, but see, when we write something as function animal, right? Animal II, functions are also in some sense objects, right? How can we test that? We know that objects are what? Objects have key and value, right? So let's say I'm creating a temp object, which just has one property, E1, right? How do I access this? I say temp.a, right? So if you look at animal II, I've just created that function, and JavaScript knows it's a function. That's why you see this F. But when you do a dot there, you can literally see a lot of properties on this, right? And we know for a fact that things which have properties are called objects. Do we understand this? Right? So what have we basically learned? We have basically learned that functions are also, in some sense, objects, right? Next thing which I'm telling you is, what is a prototype? In JavaScript, every function has a property which is called prototype, right? Which references an object, right? And if you can see, guys, when I do plot prototype, it says constructor. What this constructor means, we'll come to that later. But for now, what you should understand is animal II.prototype exists, one. Second, it's an object, and that object has some keys, right? One is a proto key, the other is constructor key. What those are, we'll look about it. Did everyone understand this? What do you want me to repeat, Mayank? Okay. See, I said two things. One, functions are also like objects in some sense, right? So animal II is a function. Do we agree with that, everyone? We can call it like this, right? Second thing which I said is every object, every function is also an object, right? What does that mean? If it's an object, it means it will have properties, key value pairs, right? And if it has key value pairs or properties, how can I access those properties? I can access them like this, like I access any object key. So animal II dot, right? And which property am I interested in accessing right now? It's called prototype, right? So when I say animal.prototype, what is it that I'm getting? What is this thing? Anyone? Guys, what is this thing? It's an object, right? Very clearly, it's an object, right? So what becomes the definition of prototype then? Every function in JavaScript has a prototype property that references an object, or that is an object. That's the only thing I said. So what is prototype? The property of a function that references an object. Is that clear? I said a very simple thing, guys. Folks, is this okay? Or is there a doubt? Please say something, say yes, say no, say something. Is it clear for everyone? Please say yes or no. Okay, great. Moving forward. So what is a prototype? Okay, now let's see how we are going to use this prototype to finally improve this. So now we've improved this a great deal, right? Using object.create. We know that for a fact. The next step that we are going to do is we are just going to take care of this guy. What do I mean by this guy? See, what is the problem? Let's look at it again. The problem is, although we've greatly improved this, however, it does not look good that the animal methods are actually separated from animal, right? Because right now these shared animal methods are, we have to basically move them into a different object. Okay, so now that we know prototype, this is what I'm going to do. Please look at this carefully, guys. So what if instead of creating a separate object to manage our shared animal methods, right? Like we are doing in the shared animal methods, we just put each of these methods on animal functions, animal i's prototype, right? Then what would happen is, then for any fail lookup that is going to happen, right? We can just reference that. Because we know that when we see, we are going to use two tools here. One, we are going to use object.create, and using that, we are just going to delegate everything to animal.prototype. Okay, let's understand how that is going to look. So I'm going to talk about a new pattern, which is called as prototypal instantiation. I'm bad if I got the spelling wrong, but it's correct. So prototypal instantiation, right? In that, what I'm going to do very simply, again, function proto animal proto, let me call it animal improved with proto, right? Takes name, takes power, right? Then what I'm going to say is, I'm going to say let animal equals object.create animal proto, name of the function dot prototype, right? Let's understand next part. Same, animal dot name equals name, animal dot power equals power. Finally, return animal. Okay. Now, what do we do with these shared methods? Very simply, guys, we move these shared methods out of here, right? I'm just going to copy all of these. Please look at this very carefully, right? I'm moving these methods here, pasting them here, right? And in front of each one of them, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say animal proto, right? Dot prototype dot eat. And that's it. Of course, this is not an object, so no commas anymore. Did everyone understand what I just did? I'll repeat it again, don't worry about that. But did someone understand what I've just done? Anyone? Yes, no, guys, say something. Is there anyone who understood? That's the question. Okay, Pavan did. Who else? Please say yes only. Don't say no. I'm going to explain it anyway. Okay, let's look at this. What nice one, Sonu, if you did. Good, Anjali. Okay, let's understand this. What do we have here? I'm using, see, did everyone understand what prototype is? Prototype is what? It's basically the property of a function which references an object. That's all I've said, right? Then the second bit that I've done is I'm calling this animal I proto, right? With the name and power, right? It's just same what I had did. The only difference between these two guys, if you look at it, is there is no shared animal methods now, right? What I am pointing this guy instead of shared, or what I'm making its parent as, is not shared animal methods anymore. It's animal I, which is this guy's prototype, right? Okay, perfect. Then what I have done is I am outside of this function, I am accessing this guy's prototype, animal I proto, and I am attaching these methods to it, eat, run, and rest to it. Okay. Now let's understand what is going to happen. Let's say I created an animal and just copy these guys again. Okay. And it's going to be animal I proto instead of animal I. Dog. Right. Now, when I create lion I proto using this mechanism, what happens, guys, is a lion object will be created with the power 100, right? When you try to do lion I proto dot, let's say eat, right? What is going to happen? Two things. Since it was created using object dot create, right? First thing, it's going to check, hey, does animal actually have the property eat? No, it does not. It just has name and power. But since it was created using object.create, any failed property lookup, right, are going to happen on the parent object. Everyone understands this bit? Failed lookups on this guy, right? That's pretty much it, guys. Then this guy, I'm just defining out of the function. That's it. Okay, are we at his aha moment? So basically, what we have done is by doing this thing, by delegating all failed lookups to the prototype, what we are achieving is now, instead of having one method of shared animal methods, we can just whatever method, let's say tomorrow I wanted to attach another method to it, right? What I'm going to say is I'm going to say animal.prototype dot, let's say, roar, right? Animal is roaring, something, right? Right? So what happens when you say lion I proto dot roar, right? It will check, hey, does it have the property? No, but it was creating using object dot create. What is the parent object? It's animal I dot prototype. So does the prototype object have a roar? Yes, it does. So call that method. Is everyone clear with this? Crystal clear? Very good, Amit. Take a minute, guys, just to understand this. If you have any questions, please bring them up. But just try to realize the improvement that we made, right? From where we started to finally using the prototype. Any field lookups on this object are now going to be delegated to the prototype. So now there is no shared animal methods. Whatever methods you want to share, you just move it onto the proto and you delegate all field lookups to the proto object, and that's it. Animal prototype is a reference of every default method, right, sir? Man, that makes no sense. Animal prototype has nothing to do with the reference of anything. Please frame your question nicely. Exactly, Shivam. That's a good point that you've tried to bring up, Shivam. Now, whenever you want to attach a property to it, you can simply attach a property to the prototype of animal proto. And what will happen is that property will get available for all of these objects that were created using animal I proto function. One question, so is it's advisable to make prototype delegations for large data objects or objects containing huge data? It has nothing to do with huge data or large data, right? See, it's not about huge data, guys. It's about a simple fact, right? That whenever you have common properties, right, which need to be accessible across every instance, right? So let's say you try to create 10,000 instances of animal, lion, dog, cat, cow, whatever, right? They are going to have certain common properties, right? Those common properties, one, you should not repeat themselves. Second, you should be in a place where you are able to dynamically assign those properties. What is the best way of doing that? The best way of doing that is using object.create with the prototype. That's the only thing that we are saying. Yes. Now, in future, if you require more common properties, Amit, please say common properties, otherwise you'll confuse yourself. When you want to add common properties, what you can do is on simply on the prototype of this function, you can just attach that property, right? I'm just calling it prop. And the moment you do this, every instance, lion, dog, cat, cow, whoever, will be able to say, hey, will be able to say lion I proto dot prop, right? What is going to happen? Prop will not be available on the animal object, which was earlier created. Field lookups will be delegated to animal.prototype, and on animal.prototype, it will find prop. Anyone, any questions? Guys, please ask. You mean this thing? Amit, are you talking about this thing? Of course, right? That's what I told you here itself, right? Whenever you create any function, it has one special property which is called prototype. So it's not a question of keyword. Of course, it's not a keyword, right? But it's a property of every function. That's what it means. And since every function is nothing but object, yes, Mayank, which line do you want to look at? Mayank, do you have a question? You scroll to the bottom. Can you please tell me the line? What do you want to see? That will help me. Okay. What about this? Is there a doubt on this? Let me know, guys. If anyone has more questions. Okay. Okay. Hopefully, guys, now what prototype is absolutely clear to us, right? So one view of outputs are in this view, we don't create animal proto. In this view, we don't create animal proto, it's handled by JS. Amit, I'm saying this again, and you're still asking the same question. All I'm saying is every function in JavaScript, is this a function or not, Amit? Just tell me this. Is this the name of the same function or not? The only thing that I've said is, only thing literally I've said is, whenever you are creating a function, JavaScript will automatically attach a prototype to that function. So is there still a doubt, Amit? So if there are common properties, then we should make objects by using prototype property. It will save our memory and time. Yes. If you have common properties, so let's understand, Vishal, we are talking about objects, right? When we are trying to create objects which have lots and lots of common properties, right? So this was an animal example. Let's say there is a car example, or there could be any other example, right? So in that case, of course, they are going to have, so let's say there are two cars, right? One car is, okay, I mean, let's just take the example of animal. So an example of animal is a lion and a dog, right? They are going to have lots of common properties, right? We've just mentioned 3 here, but there could be 10,000 common properties, right? So for the common properties, we should definitely use a prototype, right? Like we use this in this one. When you have uncommon properties, right? Then anyway, you can't do anything. So let's say I wanted to give this lion guy a roar functionality, right? So what I'm going to do in that case is I'll say lion I proto, which was created using this dot roar, right? And that could be a function. Just saying right? However, a dog, on the other hand, may have this dog proto will have bark and dog barks, right? So these specific properties, Vishal, we will of course handle them specifically because some specific properties of dog and lion can be very different. And in that case, of course, you don't have a choice, right? You have to create separate behaviors for them, right? But for common properties like this one, we use a prototype and delegate all the failed lookups to that guy's prototype. No, Sudhir, it's not a necessity that you have to do it like this, right? You can, it's a way of doing things, right? No one is stopping you to write these 10 times also for a lion. So for every lion that you create like this, you can say lion.eat, lion.run, lion.rest. It's not a problem, right? But what are we trying to learn? We are trying to get to a way where that duplication, where that wastage of memory is something that we can reduce, right? So all the methods that we learned above were doing that, like the shared animal methods was also doing that, right? But what was the problem with each one of them? Like the problem with the last one was that every property, the shared animal methods, right? Now this is also one object that you created, right? Now, anytime you have to modify a property or add a common property, you would have to put one property here, right? So we moved to a better way. What was the better way? It was called prototypal instantiation, in which we were delegating all failed lookups to animal's prototype, right? And then it made things very simple for us in the sense now whenever we have to attach or hook a property, we just say animal I proto dot prototype, we name the property, and that property will be instantly there for all the animals. Does this make sense for all? Perfectly? Why we did and what we did. Here, calling uncommon properties and uncommon properties will be a diff. Here, calling common properties and diff. Not really, right? So let's say when you want to call lion I proto dot roar, you will call it like this. When you want to say lion proto dot eat, you will call it like this. So why is there a diff or a difference? Priyanka, is there a difference in calling these two properties? See, externally, they will look exactly the same. Internally, we know, hey, for lion I proto, we had created the roar property, right? But everything else like eat, rest was on its prototype, right? And all failed lookups on any property on lion/dog were delegated to its prototype because of this line, right? So it gives you a very good way to remove that duplication. It's just a better way of doing it. Is there still a doubt, anyone? Please go ahead and ask. Guys, if you're ready, just say move and we'll move forward. Say move, Shivam. Okay, perfect. Good, we'll move forward then. Now, moving to the best part. I hope we are clear with the prototype part, right? Now, let's just go deeper into that, right? So guys, we have learned three things, if I broadly talk about it. One, we have learned about constructor functions. Second, we have learned how to add functions to the, how to add methods / functions to this functions prototype. And lastly, we've learned how to use object.create to delegate field lookups on this functions prototype, right? But now if you look at it, just for accomplishing all of these things, we had to write a lot of code, right? I mean, it was not that straightforward, right? But it looks like, these are things which should be built into any language, right? Instead of us having to, do them all by ourselves. These look like fairly common use cases, right? So shouldn't the language only handle this for you, right? So the truth is JavaScript can handle these things for you, right? And how do we do that? We do that using the new keyword, right? We'll just revisit it. Don't worry, right? Okay. So then why did we learn so many other methods, right? If there was a simple way of doing it. See, we did that because when we approach these things with the methodical approach, right? With the slow methodical approach like we did, then you just get a deeper understanding of how everything works under the hood, right? Or how JavaScript works. Now that you know that, I'm just going to make this very, very simple for you. Okay, shall we do that? Guys, shall we do that? Shall we make it into 2 lines now? Okay, let me help you with that. Right, let's please understand this. Okay, now all of these things, right? Now finally, I'm going to approach, I'm just going to call it animal, right? Because we've had enough. I'm going to give it 2 properties. One is name, the other is energy, right? And earlier, let's try to understand what we did. I'm just going to copy that. Right, I'm going to copy this like this. Right. Now, what would make it really easy, guys, is what if this thing goes away and this thing also goes away, right? And then what just happens is instead of calling it animal, I'm just going to call it this, and I'm going to call it this. Okay, this is exactly what happens. Sorry, I'll call it animal.prototype. Guys, this is exactly what happens when you, instead of calling it with, like animal, you call it like new animal. When you call the same thing, so let's say I say let lion equals new animal, lion energy is 100. When I do this, please notice the difference. This time I'm not just calling animal, but I'm saying new animal. These 2 properties. JavaScript internally will create a this for you like this. It will assign the object animal.prototype to this guy using object.create, and finally it will return this, right? So what remains is only this much code. And of course, then for all the field lookups, all you're going to do is those common properties, which is going to copy those also, right? And animal, sorry. don't know what's going wrong with my editor. That's it. Now, when you do this, right, when you create your line using this thing with the new keyword, that's all you have to do instead of all those complicated things which we did above. Now, when you say lion dot roar, what is going to happen, guys? Internally, what is going to happen is JavaScript will see, hey, does the object which was created like this, does it have a roar method? No, it does not have a roar method, right? So because it was created using new, which is basically just the equivalent of delegating pickups to prototype, it will check the prototype. Hey, does the prototype have a run method? Yes, the prototype has a run method, and it runs this guy. Are we clear? So guys, just imagine where we started from and now where we are. Please take a moment to read this, digest this. And ask questions, of course. But just remember this one thing, whenever you call it with new animal this way, internally the same thing is going to happen, guys. JavaScript will internally create a this, right? A variable called this, right? It's going to call it object.create animal.proto type, right? Let me remove this. And finally, it's going to say return this. This is how JavaScript internally works when you call it with the new keyword. But we'll comment this because we don't have to write this. What both examples, Mayank? Please take a moment, guys, to read this, ask any questions if you have. So I have one question. Question: how does a JS develop things like this new and such things implemented? Will I would be able to reach the level? If so, do I have to do this as I feel? So what do I have to do as I feel? This is not just everyday programming. See, if you understand what I just explained to you today, it's done, right, Amit? You don't have to revisit it. Exactly, are we? See, once you understand what we did today, it will be the end of it, Amit. If you are able to understand this with 100% clarity, right? That's the end of it. So you start somewhere, right? You start by understanding how it internally works. So see, if we had ignored, guys, please understand this. If we had not talked about any of the things which we talked about above, right, today, and if I had just told you these things, if I never told you that this exists, if I never told you this exists, and someone just comes and just tells you, hey, when you call it like this, when you do this, the prototype method runs, right? Then you would have never realized that internally what is going on. To understand what is internally going on in here, you had to learn so many things, right? And why you reached here. So doing this is the only way you understand the internals, right? This is the only way you understand how the language is working internally, right? Guys, does that make sense for you? Right? Without without having to know how it's internally working, we could have just done this, right? All is useful for you is this much, right? And we would have easily said that, hey, when you say this thing, the prototype method runs. But we didn't do that, right? What we did is we started from the very basics. We understand every, so basically what we've done here is 15 years of history. It took JS 15 years from going from all of these patterns to reaching here, right? With every new version, new features kept on getting added. With every new feature, new improvements kept on happening. And finally, we reached here. But if we had just learned this, then there was no way you internally understand what's going on, right? But anyway, now that it's clear, that's how you go deeper. Amit, if I answered your question. Okay. No, man, we did yesterday also, we had to spend a lot of time, right? But anyway, and the point is we did it in much shorter time because we knew what has happened earlier. Are we clear? Shall we move forward? Absolutely, Vishal. And that's a very good point to say. When you say new date, so when you say new, definitely you know that date is going to be a function, right? And this is what we had said, right, that day. In new date also, when you try to search for some properties, they don't exist, right? But a lot of, okay, now that you brought this up, a good one. Okay, let's look at this. So let's say you are storing this in a variable, right? Let D1 is equal to new date. So we know that if you want to look at all the keys of D1, we can say object.keys D1, right? What do you see, guys, here? What is it showing you? Guys, no, what is the array? How many elements does it have? It's an empty array. So does it mean that D1 has no keys? Is D1 an empty object? We know that's not true. We know that's not true because when we say D1 dot get, let's say day, we get something, right? But the weird thing is, see, it's new something. So definitely what is created as an object, but in the object, you were able to see no keys of it, right? Because internally, guys, what is happening is in the date function or in the date constructor function, it would have said this is equal to object.create date.prototype, right? And it's the date.prototype, you know, when you say d1.getDays, what JavaScript is internally doing is, see, it first checks, hey, does this have the value? Does D1 have the key get day? It does not. We can check because this array is empty. Then it delegates all of those field lookups to its prototype, right? To what? To date dot prototype, right? And this is where all these properties lie. Is this absolutely clear, everyone? So now if someone asks you, hey, is get date or get day or whatever, are these properties of day? Do these exist on D1? I mean, whenever you create a new date? No, they do not. Where do they exist? They exist on the prototype, right? We just know this, that whatever instance we had, right? D1 was an instance of date. That instance, whenever it tries to access some common property, since it was created using the new keyword, every failed lookup is going to get delegated to the prototype. Internally, we definitely know that, hey, this is going to be, so what is the parent here? Vishal, bad question. What is the parent here when I'm calling new animal? Vishal, please answer this. I think you will clear it yourself. When we call it new animal, what was the parent, Vishal? Guys, I want someone. No, it was not animal. Wrong answer. What was the parent, animal.prototype, or the prototype of animal. Is this clear for everyone? Vishal, is this clear for you? So when you asked me the same question, what is going to be the prototype for date? Sorry, what is going to be the parent for date? What is going to be the parent for date? Answer this, Vishal. Correct. It's going to be date.prototype. And we've just learned some time back, what is date? What is prototype? Nothing. It's basically one of the properties of the function which references an object. That's it. So let's say tomorrow you wanted to add a new feature to date. Let's help Amit also, because he's very keen on adding new features. So how can you do that? Amit, let's say I wanted to add some new feature to date, right? Okay, let's open this. Let's open our console again. Right. So let's say date was there. Okay. To this, I wanted to add, I don't know, let's add Amit only, right? Which is nothing but a function. It says console.log. Amit, that's how it's done. Okay. Sorry, not on date, but on date.prototype. Right. So what I've done is on the date.prototype, I've added a function which is called Amit. Right. Now, what I'm going to do is I'll just do my usual things. I'm going to create D1. This is going to be new date. Right. Now I can literally say D1.Amit. And I for sure know how is it internally working. I know that, hey, on every field lookup that happens on D1 object, the field lookups will be delegated to its prototype, and its prototype I've already hacked. I've just put this function on its prototype. Perfect answer, Vishal. That is exactly the definition. Yes. Is everyone now clear with this? What is prototype? How do we add prototypes? What prototypes help us accomplish? Easy enough. Very easy. It's so glad that you're calling one of the hardest topics of JS as easy. Good to see that. Okay. Shall we move forward? If everyone is ready to say move. I need more moves. Okay, great. Let's actually move then. Cool. So using this, right, we have accomplished the final thing. And what is since we've named all of these, I might as well name this also. This is called pseudo classical instantiation. This pattern. The second you are asked about prototype, Amit, you say the definition exactly which Vishal quoted, right? And then the interviewer is going to say, see, not a lot of interviewers are going to understand this. Interviewers are also going to know what this is. Then they say, hey, can you explain with an example? And then you give this example and it's done. Right? I can tell you this right now. Not a lot of interviewers are going to ask you this question because they would not know it themselves, very honestly. But whenever you face a JS interview, you should definitely say, what is your favorite topic? Prototypal inheritance, or say pseudo-classical instantiation is my favorite. And you deliberately move the interview on that side. where it favors you, because you will be able to explain the whole history of this. And that will actually be the end of your interview. Because you can't do better than this. If you explain it, how it started, how this, how these things which are invisible, they actually work, that's actually the end of it. Because no one is going to learn that. So if you do this, basically on that day, you are going to teach your interviewer something. Right? And interviewers love that when they are able to learn something. I'm not kidding. I mean, you might think I'm joking, but I really mean that. Just begin from the very starting, okay? That, sir, you know what? First of all, we have functional instantiation, right? But it's going to waste a lot of memory. So we should have shared methods, okay? But you know what? With the latest version of JS, what they've done is they've abstracted all of this. How have they done it? This is how they have done it, using constructor functions and pseudo-classical instantiation. Okay, what is pseudo-classical instantiation? Let me explain it. And then you do this exercise. That's the end of it. Yep, that will be the end of it. Cool. Shall we move forward? Yes, Amit, that's exactly what is going to happen. Cool. We will move forward then. Okay. Guys, now that you know all of these things, let's go one level deeper. Right? Shall we go one level deeper now? Even after this one? Right? So what was the intention of all of this? Right? Let's try to understand this. The intention of doing all of this is to be able to create objects, isn't it? At the end of the day, what all of this code above is doing, it's creating objects, right? It created a lion doing all of this code. Just that it gave us the power of, it just gave us the power of putting it or creating it in a better fashion. Right? At the end of the day, you have just created an object. If you forget the above code, right, because you will never see the above code, what you're going to see is this. Right? This is all we have done, isn't it? We have just created an animal, right? And by some magic, which is happening in the above lines, let's not talk about it. We are able to do a lot of stuff. We are able to say roar, we are able to say eat, and all sorts of things, right? But can we all agree that at the end of the day, we have just created an object? Yes or no, guys? Yes. What we have done is we have created a perfect object. Okay. Now, I wanted to introduce you to JavaScript's way of doing it better, right? And what is that way? There is something known in JavaScript as, does anyone want to guess what I'm about to say? For making this object creation simpler? Nahi, Amit, inheritance nahi. It's called a class, right? It's not actually a class, it's actually the class keyword, right? Which exists in a lot of other languages also, like Java, like C++, and many other languages, right? Class is the basic of it, right? So what? So for those of you, since most of you are unfamiliar with what a class is, class allows us to create the blueprint of an object, right? So whenever you create an instance of a class, you get an object, right? So here, can I say that lion is an instance, this lion is an instance of animal? Can I say that? Yes or no, guys? Lion is nothing but an instance of animal, right? So if I just want to frame that, what can I say? That, hey, there was a class lion, right? There was a class of animals, right? So what is animal? If you look at in that sense, animal is a class, right? And what is lion? Lion is an instance of the class animal. What are you and me? We are the instances of class. We are the instances of the class human, right? So the instance of a class is basically what? It's an object. Does this definition make sense for everyone? Instances of class. All I have said is instances of class are called objects, right? Okay. Cool. So basically what we did is with our animal constructor, right? We created an instance of an object, but we did not use the class keyword, which I was just mentioning about, right? Because a class keyword, guys, in JavaScript was introduced much later. Okay. But now, if we really want to learn the class syntax also, or the class way of doing it, let's learn that. Shall we learn that? How we can do the same thing using class? Do you want to learn that? Okay, cool. So everything that you just did above can be done, sort of better with the class keyword. So let's understand how we do that. First, we say class, name of the class, right? There are no brackets like functions, but these things, right? Finally, if you guys remember, what is the type of this function called? It's called a constructor function, right? Anything which is invoked with the new keyword is called a constructor function in JS. So this is nothing but a constructor function, correct? Great. Similarly, in this class, we have something called as the constructor. Okay. Now it's going to do the same thing, name and energy. And it's not, then you're just going to do those associations. This dot name equals name. This dot energy equals energy. Right? And lastly, all the prototype methods that you are created like this, they can be created inside the class. How do we do that? Let's understand this. So we create an eat method, right? Actually, I'm just going to copy this to save time. Okay, but now there is no need to say prototype. You can simply say eat, right? And you don't need to say function, and you can just say it like this, right? So run, and finally rest. No function, right? So basically the syntax, so the above code and this code, they do exactly the same thing, exactly the same thing, right? And how do you create an animal with this? And I'm just going to call it animal C, right? Animal class. And then I say let lion class equals new animal C with the values name, liony, and energy 100. That's it. What this above code did by adding two prototypes, making a function, you can just encapsulate or put everything under one roof, which is called the animal class. And that's how the class syntax or the class keyword helps you. It just helps you write better code. It does the exact same thing, right? Because most of the people who are coming from object-oriented language background, like Java, right? Because JavaScript is typically not the first language which most people learn, right? So they are comfortable with the class syntax, right? And that's it. So JavaScript came up with a class syntax. But guys, let me explain this very well, that internally, when you write this, JavaScript is going to convert this code into what we have written above. That's what happens internally or under the hood, right? So what is the class keyword actually called in JavaScript? It's syntactical. What that means, what does this term mean? It means it's just a way of writing code. It does not have any significance, so to say. Okay, but it just makes writing the code a bit easier. does the exact same thing. And sir, in here, if we wish to add another common property, how do we do that? See, Amit, whenever you're creating a class, right, the intention of having these methods or these functions, now we'll call it methods because we've entered the domain of object-oriented programming. These methods, right, inside the class, these are the common functionalities, right? So you would specify them in here. Of course, you can still go ahead and say animal c.prototype, but it's better. See, either you use one type of syntax or you use another. You should not intermix them, right? So whenever you want to add some common property to here, to this guy, you just mention that common property here. Internally, however, works the same. Animal C's prototype is getting populated with these things. Everyone, are we clear? Yes, Amit. No, see, you don't have to. You should. You can still do the same thing. You can still say animal c.prototype.rest. Why? Because internally we know that it's doing the same thing, right? But it's a better practice. You mention it here. There is no best way to write code. So at least I don't know of one. They're basically styles. This is style 1, that is style 2. Whatever you feel comfortable with, you write. Both of them internally do the same thing. People who are coming from object-oriented background will understand this syntax better. They will like this better. But people like me who are more functional programming based, we like the syntax. But 95% people are going to like this one. Thank you, Amit. That was very kind. Right. So guys, at this point, we have covered all the fundamentals of JavaScript's prototype, right? Now, there are a few other things, right, which we want to learn to understand these fundamentals deeper and also understand how inheritance also works in JavaScript, right? But I would like to stop here today because I know this is getting very, very dense. So we will just pause here for today. And then tomorrow we are going to continue with the other things. Here run and the rest of the same pattern will not have any effect. So here run and rest. Will it affect in any way? No, RV, it's exactly the same like what we have done above, right? Right? Folks, shall we pause here? Okay. Right, so we'll pause here because I know these are dense concepts. Wouldn't want to overboard you, right? So anyway, tomorrow we are meeting again. Yes, yes. Take your time to revise. Sonu, can you just mention the name of the book? Okay, stopping here. Yes. Cool, guys. We are done with today's class. If you have any questions, please bring them up. Please ask your questions. I will push the code. Code is pushed. So now just give me a minute. Why we write contents in index and use JS. Amit, I didn't get your question. Do you mean why should we do that, or I mean, what is the question? Yes, I can unmute you. Sure. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
So first of all, I'd like to say something. You know, this is my first time in my life. I haven't slept for more than 24 hours. I was out of town, and I just came in to attend the class. I was feeling so damn sleepy, but
Right.
क्लास करते करते मेरा नींद उड़ गया है, and पता नहीं वो अभी लग रहा है कि just fresh सोकर उठे. But then anyway, sir, thank you so much. So what I was asking is कि when we can add elements, add style, do everything, then would it be advisable that have empty index.html and style.css and do everything with our JavaScript file?
Sure. Let me try to answer that. See, the problem is when you write you can't have index.html as empty, right? You will need to have those scripts. You will need to have the script tags.
Yes, the head, body, and other things, but then the elements and all we can handle with JS.
Yes. So essentially, what you're talking about is something called as client-side rendering, right? Where you're using JavaScript to create HTML, right?
Right.
This is what a lot of the popular frameworks like React also do. So that's how they internally work.
Okay.
You write code, right? But there are two sides to this, okay? Because typically the JavaScript is not going to be kept on the so let's say I'm trying to load your website, right, on my browser. The JavaScript is not going to be on my computer, right? I need to get those JavaScript files from the server.
Okay.
Right.
So the load time may increase and speed may hamper.
Yes. So to achieve the fastest first paint, right?
Okay.
See, index.html is always going to be the first to get loaded, right? That's where everything starts.
Got it, sir.
If you have some HTML at least written there, and all the scripts set to deferred mode, right, which we learned, then what is going to happen is you will still be able to show the customers some page, some CSS, right, some style, and then you keep improving the experience as those scripts getting loaded. Okay.
And so the second question was, say, like I make a program and say you are my client, or you make a program, I am your client, like we give the program to the client, or we give the software, whatever it is. So the HTML is exposed, the CSS is exposed, and the main core, the JavaScript, is also exposed. So how do I is there any way of compiling or something like that, or encoding, so that, like, suppose you are my client and I feel that अरे code क्यों दे, so I hand over the project to you, but you are unable to see my code. Is there any such way for that?
Yes. So typically, if you see in a lot of browsers, there are two techniques. One is name mangling. The other is minification, right? So basically, what such programs do is see, because your variables right now are going to have meaningful names, right? Order from array or something like that, right?
Right.
What name mangling is it's going to make those variables meaningless. So maybe it'll make that variable, which was a meaningful variable, to underscore A1, right? Okay. And then it will just remove all the spaces, right? It will just minify that JavaScript file to very, very small, because we know that it's space insensitive, right?
Okay.
And then basically the other person is not going to be able to understand anything. So that's how you give them a functional code, but not a readable code.
Okay. Got it, sir. And there was one more question which I forgot. If I happen to recollect it, I'll again ping you, sir. Sure. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Sonu, you wanted to say something. I'll unmute you next. Please go on.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, Sonu.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Sonu.
सर मैं आपको एक पहले बुक दिखाना चाहता हूँ क्योंकि मैंने आज ना अभी डाउनलोड करी है।
नाम
ना
बता
तो
दो।
कभी ऐसा ना हो कोई दूसरा वर्जन हो जाए। एलिक्वेंट जेएस है वो,
हाँ
ये
वही
वाली।
वाली बुक है।
स्क्रीन शेयर कर दूं मैं आपके साथ?
स्क्रीन
एक
मत
बार
शेयर,
स्क्रीन शेयर कर दूं मैं आपके साथ?
वो नहीं कर पाओगे आप स्क्रीन शेयर, इट्स
अच्छा,
डिसेबल्ड फ्रॉम हियर, बट
ओके सर।
एनीवे द पॉइंट इज अगर आपने eloquent.js यहाँ से डाउनलोड किया eloquent.js.net से, that's the only book, right? And my suggestion will be don't download it, just read it from the website itself. I'm just मैंने chat पे भी website का नाम पिंग किया आपको, just read it from here, काफी readable है यहाँ से भी,
ओके सर।
so डाउनलोड करने का जरूरत ही नहीं है एक्चुअली।
अच्छा सर, नहीं शेयर करके मैं सर आपको एक वो दिखाना चाहता था क्योंकि अभी सेकंड प्रोजेक्ट मांग रहे हैं ना हमारा, तो उसमें मैंने सेकंड प्रोजेक्ट बनाया तो उसमें थोड़ा सा ना अपना मैं नाम मेंशन करना चाहता था जैसे प्रोजेक्ट के नीचे ना, तो उसमें थोड़ी प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट हो रही थी तो वो दिखाना चाहता
आप
था।
मुझसे स्पेसिफिक क्वेश्चन पूछ लो, स्क्रीन शेयरिंग इज डिसेबल्ड फ्रॉम न्यूटन साइड।
ओके सर,